being a success, as well as giving children better opportunities of a good start in life. There's a wide range of needs in Abbey, and there's a number of reasons why families choose an early years provider. Cost and location are both taken into account. It's really important that a range of provision is supported across the ward, especially in a place like Abbey, where so many children have not had an equal start in life. Seesaw doesn't just serve the Gelfrid school catchment. Most of their children come from areas north of Newmarket Road, and it's important that there's an early years provision that's near to those families and that meets their needs. Currently, a number of children are missing parts of their sessions because of the difficulties in getting to and from site. And given the need for both sites, I'm confident that without both sites in action, families will slip through the net and children will suffer. Since January 2019, our ward has seen a 327% increase in benefit claimants, a ward that was already the only ward in the city to become more deprived since 2015. The effects of the COVID pandemic are not going away quickly, and we're expecting a tsunami of need to come up in this area. Removing the preschool from the community hub site will leave a gap in provision for children in the area, and will put the vision for the thriving community hub at risk, effectively hanging out to dry the poorest and most vulnerable community in the city. The community of Abbey really need you, the Children and Young People's Committee, to do the right thing today for the long-term future of the early years provision in Abbey. And please vote for the early years provision to move back to the community centre site rather than staying on its current temporary location. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Nikki. Members, any members like to ask a point of clarity from Nikki? No, I can't see anybody. No, okay, so Nikki, thank you very much for addressing the committee today. We will note your comments and that will be taken into consideration when we debate the report after we've heard from all the speakers. We will now hear from Dr. Alexandra Boulat, a Cambridge resident. Dr. Boulat, would you like to address the committee? You have 3 minutes. You will be asked to stop after 3 minutes from the Democratic Services Officer, but we won't cut you dead. But over to you, Alexandra.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for accepting this question. I realize there's a lot of interest on this topic, so I'm really grateful to be able to ask this question today. And it's also very good to see others making similar points that I will make as well on this occasion. The County Council has promised a new nursery since 2013, so we're speaking about almost 10 years now, and unfortunately local residents are still waiting for this promise to be brought to reality. And as you are aware, and as Nikki Shepherd before really stated very well with reference to a lot of figures, Abbey is the most deprived ward in Cambridge. Many children live in poverty, the need is increasing, and really the families in Abbey need state-funded early years provision and a long-term strategy for this provision in the ward. It's really essential that there are modern facilities for earlier provision in this area, and those decisions should really be based on need rather than on savings and short-term savings. And this need is really clear when speaking to Abbey residents, when speaking to families and parents in the area. It's really clear how many parents and families benefit directly from those services and describe those services as essential and very important to their everyday lives. Now, the report that I read for today on the delivery of the earlier provision in Abbey underlines the benefits of co-locating services, especially in terms of the location impact, but also on how this would actually encourage the use of other services which are essential for families and children, and those services are perhaps underused in some communities, and it would be really good to co-locate the services to make sure that families and children benefit from across different services in that sense. So my question is very brief, and I won't take the full 3 minutes, is I would like to ask why the recommendation is putting short-term savings above a longer-term strategy and vision for earlier provisions in an area where the need will surely increase, and why is the recommendation not taking into account what has been actually promised to residents for many years and what residents in Abbey actually expect from local elected representatives to deliver on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bulat. Members, have any members got any questions they'd like to ask Dr. Bulat? No, I can't see any. Again, thank you very much for your comments, which we will take into consideration during the report. And just to, give a short answer from the chair in relation to your question, members of the committee will have to consider all the financial implications, all the other issues that we did need to look at. So it's not just quite as simple as saying short-term savings and making it sustainable. So we will consider that during the debate. And thank you very much for addressing the committee. You and I will get something in the diary in relation to meeting. I know I've asked officers to arrange that, so it is trying to be organised. So I will see you outside this meeting. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Members, we'll now finally move to the last speaker, Councillor Nikki Macy. Councillor Macy, good afternoon. Nice to see you. Cambridge City Councillor for the Abbey Ward. You have 3 minutes, Councillor Macy, to address the committee. Over to you.
Thank you. Ordinarily, people who have seen me speak before know that I don't like to repeat what others have said before, but on this occasion, I'm going to make that to be an exception. I think it is very valid to point out that the East Barnwell Community Project has a very long history to it. It's taken quite some time to get to where we are, but the project was all about community cohesion and joint location, which is very similar to the Think Community approach that's being used and that we hear being spoken about throughout the County Council and other services today. So the original plan, as we know, was to return the current provider Seesaw to its home after the construction was completed, to be alongside the new library, and that link is really valid and really important. I think that's something that we need to really, I would ask the committee to dig into about whether co-location, do you really feel that by separating that, it will be beneficial to the children, to the library and to the nursery itself? In regards to the Seesaw as a provision, the fact that Seesaw was based in East Barnwell Community Centre was so that it could have nursery facilities that are spread across the ward, like they are in every other ward. So why would Abbey be any different from any other ward? That's something that I really like the answer to be known, really. We really do need to be keeping Seesaw within the East Barnwell Community Centre. It does serve a totally different region to the Abbey Ward than the other nurseries do. Linking the two up will just create further confusion, I feel, with regards to parents when they need to decide as to which nursery provision they are going to go to. It takes away that element of choice. And I think that really is concerning. Well, I'm also concerning to see that if the Seesaw was to go back into the new centre, that their rent and service charges would more than double. And that is, again, really worrying news for Seesaw and for the families who live in the most deprived ward in the Cambridge City, who would obviously be affected by these increasing charges. I would also like to point out that it's really upsetting for all of our residents because there's not been any wide consultation by the County Council on this proposal, and that really does feel like, as it was said before me, that is a kick in the teeth to the residents who have been consulted on this for many years, and yet with something so key such as early years provision, there has been no consultation with the public, and that's really sad to see. I would urge the committee to see that the Seesaw Nursery is included within the new East Barnwell Community Centre at their current rates. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Macy. Members of the committee, does anybody want to ask a question of clarity from Councillor Massey? No, I can't see anybody's. Okay, so thank you very much, Councillor Massey, for addressing the committee today. We will take your comments and remarks into account when we go on to discuss this. I'm now going to move this over to a debate now for the committee members only. In addition to Claire Buckingham, we are also joined by Alan Fitz, the 0 to 19 Area Education Officer, Sarah Anderson, I believe is here, yeah, a Strategic Asset Manager, and John Macmillan, Group Asset Manager, who are all available here to answer any specific questions from members. So members, over to you do you wish to ask anything? So Councillor Whitehead, please.
Thank you. I want to speak, as it were, on this project, but I also have some questions I'd just like clarified first, if I may, Chair. It says that there will be a capital. It talks about the cost. Sum of 300,000 was originally included in the capital programme for the early years, and that was taken out. And then it goes on to say the capital contribution required for the provision of the early years element is now believed to be in the region of 450k. What exactly is that contribution required for? I'd like an answer to that, because I then have a supplementary question on that. So I would like to know really what that element is actually for. So if I could have an answer to that question.
Okay,
Chair,
thanks, Joan. Claire, would you like to come in there?
Yeah, that's for the capital build cost of the early years part of the hub redevelopment. I don't know if John McMillan wants to add anything on other than that.
No, you've got it right. I mean, there is a cost to providing the space, and early estimate is around 450,000.
Okay, thank you. Joan, do you want to come in with...
Yes, I do, because as I understand it, there is something in the region of 1.8 million in the County Council's capital programme, which was assigned to the Barnwell Hub project. Originally, it was much greater than that before. I will not bore you with the vicissitudes of this project, which have been many, other than to say that the fact that it's taken so long is due to a whole variety of reasons, which I can't go into. And it's not been through any lack of will on the part of the County Council. But if that capital provision is still there, and I understand it is still there, then there is absolutely no reason why that capital provision in the County Council's budget cannot be used to provide this 450k. And I'm therefore rather puzzled that it's been put in as a new contribution, when in fact there has been money in the capital programme for this project since its very beginning in 2013.
Okay, John Lewis, are you able to answer that question? Because I guess it's there's always a repayment on the back of that 1.8 million pound in the capital budget, isn't there? So can you put any sort of detail behind that?
Yeah, obviously, this is not funded through a capital grant of any kind, so we don't get funding for early years provision from government. So ultimately, we would have to borrow the money, and we do pay that off over a 25 to 40 year period, which has a revenue implication on the council. And again, we do not receive a revenue allocation either, because early years provision is funded through the dedicated schools grant. So that's why the need to consider the capital cost is absolutely critical.
But I'm sorry, Chair, I am unclear why the capital money for the Barnwell Hub in its entirety, which is in the plan, because after all, this was originally, and we were almost at the point of starting the building, was being paid for by the council. They've now moved to a scheme where we hope it's going to be financially neutral, but I still don't see why the council should be saying it's not going to pay. After all, 450k is a relatively modest amount, and it's not even the whole of the amount that was put away for this project. Why it's now saying we're not going to contribute anything towards the building of this project. I find that really is quite unacceptable, given that the council was initially prepared to pay the whole of the cost for this community centre, which is, as the speakers have said, and I strongly support, badly needed in this area. So I do think that's a matter that does need further consideration, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Joan. Officers, any remarks on that?
The only remark I would put in is, I thought the purpose of this meeting was to decide whether the nursery was on one site or the other. The other thing is, on the Barnwell site, the council will also have to provide a new library, a community centre, and so on. So there are other things that will have to be funded by the county council as well. But I thought at this stage we're just looking at one site or the other.
Chair, I would agree with that, but as the money has been brought into it as an argument against moving Seesaw back, I thought it was a point that should be raised.
It's a good valid point, and you're both right. I mean, ultimately, it is about the provision as opposed to the financial cost of it. And you'll note that in the recommendation. So it is a valid point for members to think about and discuss. Councillor Batchelor, would you like to come in?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm probably going to annoy officers by asking another question about money now. But I see another one of the disadvantages for the East Barnwell site was that the annual rent charges would be some £16,500 higher than they currently are. I was just wondering if I get a bit of clarity on that. So if I'm reading that right, the Seesaw Nursery would have to pay £16,500 more per year to relocate to that site and use that facility than what they used to, or the council would charge £16,500 more than they currently are for their current location. Could I get some clarity on what exactly that means, please?
Who's going to take that one, please?
I think I'd look to John McMillan to answer that one.
Well, I can answer. It's not my specialist area, but I mean, the council leases out many early years sites, and the usual expectation is a market rent unless the setting cannot afford to pay it. And so then we're in what in local government terms is what they call a less than best rent. The less than best rent is based on, well, effectively an assessment of what the setting is making out of the business, what it can afford to pay, etc. So the council has many settings that are paying a less than best rent, but there's a process to go through to establish that, and that's probably something more. Well, I would hope that our education colleagues will probably be able to say a bit more about that. Perhaps John Lewis. But we start off with the principle of a market rent, and if the setting cannot afford to pay that, we will then look at a less than best, and there is a process for establishing that.
Yeah, so we would take that would be our starting point, and then we would work through that with the setting. So I think that I suppose the point to make here is that it could be in the region of that number that's been quoted, 16,600, but we would have to work through the less than best process to see what potentially the provider would be paying on that site.
Okay, so essentially that's the going rate.
Yes. That reflects what the rent, the service and the utility costs would be for operating from the newly developed site. That would be our starting point that would be the starting point of discussions with the provider, and then we would look at going through the process of the less than best application.
Okay, thanks.
Simon, can I just also clarify? Yeah. The reason we have to do this is that this is a market-led sector. You know, there are private companies that operate in this area. It's not state-run. There is some state funding attached to the sector, and you know, ultimately, we cannot subsidise everyone that's out there. We do have assets, and we can go through a process to do that. But equally, you know, the council cannot subsidise itself if we've got fixed costs that we're having to pay, rates and other things like that. That has to be paid regardless. So there may be a financial cost, and that's part of the review that we would do around, you know, the less than best value. So we have to go through that process. But equally, lots of other providers are paying full rent for their accommodation that are not owned by the council. So we have to be fair to the sector.
Okay, thank you, John. Councillor Whitehead.
Yeah, I just wonder then, why is the rent so low at the moment if that's the process we go through? Have Seesaw already gone through a process of paying less than best rent for the accommodation they have on the Galfreed site? And if they've already gone through it, why can't we carry it forward?
So
sorry, go on.
So that what they're currently paying will reflect the arrangements under which they are operating from the mobile, which is on the school site. which is run by an academy. So it is a different scenario.
And sorry, just to be really clear, one of the big costs is rates, and there are, because the school is on a school site, there is an exemption from rates to 90% of the costs are relieved due to the status. So you're not comparing like with like, there's different cost base because of where it's located.
Okay, thanks, John. I think Councillor Whitehead's frozen. So any other are you still there, Joan?
I am still there.
Yeah, sorry, right. I thought you'd frozen. Sorry.
No. Sorry,
Joan,
I've kept my hand up. If you want other people to speak, that's fine. But I do want to speak about the project in general. Those were simply questions for clarification.
No, that's absolutely fine. Well, you can come back, Joan, because nobody else has got their hand up at the moment. Right. So would you like to carry? Because I know it's close to your heart with it being in your ward. So carry on.
Right. I don't really need to repeat all that the three speakers have said, because they have said really, and I think made a very strong case for why Seesaw should go back into the new community hub. It was located in the community hub before. I have asked repeatedly, I gather there was that Seesaw themselves were asked about what they wanted to do. And I have been asking for the past week for this committee to have the results of that survey of Seesaw itself. Is that encapsulated in the letter from the chair of the trustees, or were the people who work at Seesaw, were they consulted? And if so, what was their view on where Seesaw should be? And I've been asking for this, Simon, for a week, and I've had no response so far. So is there a response from Seesaw? Were they asked?
There was Rashenda, was there something circulated? I'm just trying to look for it now. Was there any comments made by
There was
officers?
a letter from the chair of trustees.
Yeah.
Yes, as Councillor Whitehead said, the letter from the chair of trustees was circulated, and there was an officer comment as well from Claire Buckingham.
I haven't seen Claire's comment. Could she give it to us now?
You're on mute, Claire.
Yes, so on the 1st of October, officers met with representatives from the trust and from Seesaw, from the preschool, to go through the pros and cons of the two locations. And in fact, I think, am I right in thinking, Alan, were you part of that meeting? I'm not. I'm afraid I wasn't at that. I'm not aware of anything that came out of it in terms of written conclusion from Seesaw.
Claire, no, I wasn't a part of the meeting.
Okay.
But I understand they did support staying at the East Barnwell Community Hub. Was their preference?
Okay.
So they're saying that it's their preference to go to the East Barnwell hub. Is that absolutely clear?
Yes, that was my understanding. Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Chair. I mean, I think that the case has been put about the co-location with other facilities, about the access for the most deprived area of the ward, and the fact that Seesaw themselves wish to go back in the hub. I think these are really important considerations, and I do hope that the committee will, vote for Seesaw to go back into the hub. I think the money issue, as we've explored, really, I don't think should be coming into this, because as far as I'm concerned, there is money there to cover this. And I think we should be looking at the needs of the children, the needs of the community, and the wishes of Seesaw themselves. And I think these should carry weight with us. And I sincerely hope that the committee will agree to Seesaw going back into this much needed and much delayed community hub. Thank you very much.
Can I just add that in the written submission from Jo Brasher, who's the chair of Seesaw Preschool, which I think was circulated to members in advance of this meeting, she does close with the sentence, "We feel very strongly that being part of the new community centre would enable our families to access various other services like the library and other family groups, especially for our hard to reach families who gain trust in us, allowing us to support them."
Thank you, Claire.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Downs.
Yes, thank you. Can I just ask, has the community centre been built already? Is it in the process of being built? Has it been commissioned? What stage is it at? Are we talking about changing something that's already underway, or reallocating the use of the space we had in mind for Seesaw? Where exactly is the project?
Claire, would you like to clarify that, please, for Councillor Downs?
Well,
Yeah, well, I think John McNill is probably best placed. It's at the point where design needs to be finalised prior to going forward for planning, but John can probably add a little bit more detail to that.
no, that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, we're aiming to get it into planning in June, but at the moment we need to know, is it on this site or the other site, so we can we push on with the design and also do some more number crunching. Yeah.
Councillor Whitehead, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, may I just add that it is to replace, Peter, a rather dilapidated community hub that's already on the site.
Yes, I remember the old one. I just wondered how far the new one had gone.
Planning.
Yeah, so basically, because no one else has got their hand up, just to try and summarise this then, we're being asked as a committee to decide where we think the early years provision should be within the Abbey ward in relation to this. And we've got a simple choice here. Obviously, a finance is a consideration, but that's for the Commercial Investment Committee to decide upon. We, as the Children and Young People's Committee, are being asked to give an opinion in relation to early years, and that is, do we keep it at the Garfield site with a view to exploring the fields, or do we consider moving it back to the Barnfield site where representation has been made today? For me, is yes, we've got to consider that. I guess as an education authority and an early years setting, we are already providing that. It's quite clear the Garfield Centre has been providing that for the last 18 months or so. I don't know the exact time frame, but around about 18 months. And I also understand that there was no fall in use, I believe, in when it moved from the Barnfield site to the Garfield site, where it's appears to be working fine at the moment. So that's for members to decide. You've got the recommendations in front of you. I think it's important, given no one else is wanting to speak now, is we move to the recommendations, and I'll turn to each member and ask them whether they're in favour, against, or want to abstain in relation to the recommendations before you. Do you want me to read what those recommendations are, or are you happy just to see as tabled?
Read them, please.
Okay, so we've been asked to note and comment on the report and consider each option for the future delivery of sessional preschool early years provision to serve the Abbey ward in Cambridge City, taking account of the officer's assessment that the council will continue to be able to meet its duty to secure sufficient and suitable early years places, irrespective of which option is implemented. We have also been asked to note the views of the local members, which is what we've done, and this has been done. Okay, we now need to decide an appropriate recommendation for officers, taking into account the officer recommendation at paragraph 2.16 of the report that the provision currently provided by Seesaw Preschool remain in its current accommodation on the site of Galford Primary School. A long-term solution of either continuing on the current preschool site or relocating into the fields can be investigated further by officers. Okay, so they're the recommendations. I'm going to now move to the list. If you could then say, sadly, that the co-opted member, Andrew, you're not able to have voting rights on this, so just so you know, okay. So Councillor Ambrose Smith, how would you like to vote?
For the recommendation.
Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I just be clear, in recommendation 3, are members being asked to vote in favour of remaining on the Galford site?
2.16.
Yes, I thought I'd made that clear.
Sorry,
but,
I was unclear, my apologies.
Is members absolutely clear what they're voting on? Yeah, I see nodding heads. Okay, so Councillor Ambrose Smith, is your vote still the same?
It is, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Batchelor.
I'll vote against, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Downs.
Yes, I will vote against. I believe it should go back to the Barnwell Community College as promised.
Thank you. Councillor Every.
For.
Councillor Hay.
Sorry, Chair, I step 4.
Councillor Hoy.
For.
Councillor Simon Taylor.
Against the recommendation.
Councillor Whitehead.
Against the recommendation.
Councillor Whitson.
For the recommendation.
Okay, and myself, Councillor Bywater, I'm for the recommendation. Okay, so from my calculations, Rashenda, that is by a majority, is that right?
That's right, Chair. It's
The
by
recommendations carried. Okay, so thanks again to those members of the public who have taken the time to share their views with the committee.
Chair, sorry, may I interrupt? Could we have that as a recorded vote, please?
It is videoed anyway. We're on live.
I would still like it
so
recorded in the minutes, please, Chair.
that's absolutely fine. That can be done.
Chair,
I'd like the community to know where the fault for them losing their provision in the Barnwell Hub rests. Thank you.
Chair, just to be clear, an individual member can ask for their vote to be recorded. For the full committee's vote to be recorded, we would require 5 members in favour of that.
Okay, so have we got 5 members in favour of that?
Yeah. Councillor Simon Taylor.
Councillor Downs, Councillor Ed, Councillor Batchelor, that's 4.
Chair, isn't it before the vote is taken?
You're on mute, Rashenda, please.
Apologies. Yes, it would normally be asked before the vote is taken.
Okay, so we've missed that opportunity then, haven't we?
Well,
sorry, is it still possible then for the those of us who voted against to now request you to record our vote in the minutes?
Any member who
as an individual person
to be recorded, I can do that.
As an individual, yeah. So that's Councillor Whitehead, Councillor Batchelor, Councillor Downs, and Councillor Simon Taylor.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll note that.
I think we've clarified that now. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll now turn to agenda item number 5, housing related support services for young people. This report will be introduced by Lisa Sparks, Commissioner for Housing Related Support. Could you let Lisa into the meeting? Is she here? Lisa, yes, you are.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Lisa. Over to you, please. Thank you.
Right. Okay. So just in terms of the housing related support, we've obviously been to committee a few times to give updates and to let you know where we are. So just a reminder that the housing related support services that we commission are services that we fund the dedicated support staff. These services do not deliver a statutory function, and we don't actually cover the accommodation costs of these services. They are provided through separate funding streams. In 2018, we undertook a review of all the housing related support services, and one of the key recommendations from that review was for us to look at redesigning services. So the redesign work has come out of that review and is also supported by the new housing related support strategy that was adopted at the end of last year. In terms of current services, I've listed those all at 2.1. The services that we've got are quite historic. They've been in place for a number of years, and they have been really commissioned as individual services rather than as a cohesive system. So things are delivered, quite similar things are delivered in a very different way across areas and even across similar districts. So we're quite clear that the services that we've got are still delivering some very good outcomes for the people who are using them. But we also know that they're not able to meet the full range of presenting needs. In terms of the new model, to replace what we have at the moment, what we are proposing is we move from this reliance on large hostel-based accommodation and we adopt a hub and spoke approach to give us a more place-based and person-centred approach. Doing this will give us an increased range of accommodation and support options. So we'll still have some larger units where you'll have staff delivering support on site, but alongside that we'll have smaller community-based units as well, which can be available in a variety of different locations. There's also ability to be much more flexible about the use of the smaller units, so they can provide an alternative to hostel accommodation. They're also available to provide step down or move on options for those people who need some ongoing support before they move fully into independence. And they can also be configured in a way that will allow perhaps particular groups to be supported together. So, for example, units that are dedicated as female-only accommodation. So in procuring the new model, what we're seeking to do is meet some of the gaps that were identified by our review. So, for example, this need for step-down accommodation, to move away from the reliance on the traditional hostel-based model and adopt a more innovative approach that takes account of good practice for things like St Basil's Pathway. We want to ensure services are accessible and the pathways actually work for customers. And ensure new services are designed flexibly so they can respond to changing needs and demands. To deliver it, the procurement approach that we are hoping to adopt will allow us to work collaboratively with provider market and partners to redesign the services. A lot of that work's already been undertaken, and we've had good engagement to date from a variety of providers and partners, internal and external. The recommissioning, we're also going to make sure that we take account of some learning from the COVID-19 pandemic. We're aware that one of the issues was the large amounts of shared accommodation. So as we move forward with recommissioning, we'll also be looking for larger units to have a requirement for at least 50% of the units to have en suite facilities. So should we find that we're in that situation again, there's more resilience within the actual properties. In terms of the approach that we're seeking to take, we're looking to take a light touch dialogue approach to the procurement. That's the stages of that are set out at 2.14, but essentially it allows us to have interim bids submitted, and then there's an option for dialogue with the bidders before a final bid, which allows us an opportunity to discuss any concerns and gives people a chance to look at certain elements of their bid and tweak before they can resubmit a final bid. The light touch dialogue approach was selected as well because it was felt it gave bidders the opportunity to develop a model that meets needs and is also innovative, and having the dialogue means that we mitigate any risk of us receiving bids for a model that doesn't meet our needs, because we have that opportunity to have the dialogue and the discussion with the providers between the stages and the submissions. In terms of the weighting of the evaluations, we're requesting or recommending a 70-30 quality to price ratio split. The greater quality weighting will basically help us to incentivize providers to develop the best solution possible so that they're not overly focused just on price. And 10% of that quality score will be allocated to the questions designed and evaluated by those with lived experience. We are proposing that there is one lot, so one contract per district, and that will ensure a consistent and joined up approach across each area. We're also recommending a 7-year contract, which includes extensions, and that reflects the scale of the change and the commitment of providers to developing, embedding and delivering the new model as well. 2.21 sets out the proposed budget for each area, and 2.22 just shows the proposed timetable. In terms of implementation, we are aware that this is a large-scale change, and that there's going to be a significant transition period needed. So a transition plan will be agreed with the winning bidder with very clear milestones, and that will be managed using the contract. So the service will be developing once the contract has been awarded.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa. Very helpful. I know this has been a long journey for you, so thank you. Members, anybody want to raise any questions in relation to this? Okay, so I'll just go through the list as it's appeared. So Councillor Downs first then, please.
Yes, just a very quick question. If you describe this as a light touch approach, what would a heavy touch approach be?
The light touch approach just refers to the procurement approach that we're taking. So the option that we've selected is to go for what they call a light touch dialogue approach for procurement. You can have a full dialogue approach as well, but that's a very involved system with lots of different meetings. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of things that puzzle me slightly about this report. you talk a lot about this step down and moving people towards independence. I'm not exactly clear what that entails, and the report doesn't seem to make it clear to me, because that does seem to be the critical difference between what we've got at the moment and what we're moving towards. And linked to that is the question that some of our current providers be in a position to actually bid, to have a contract to do this, both accommodation and this step down approach. And finally, are you going to do it on an individual basis? So could each of these current providers put in a bid to become someone who also provides step down? Or are you just looking for one overall large provider to run all services?
Okay, so if I can start with the last question. So we would be looking at one contract per district. So there wouldn't be one provider providing services across the county, but we would be looking at one contract per district area. We are very much encouraging partnership bids between providers. We've done a lot of work with our existing providers in designing the model, and also encouraging them to actually start to have conversations together about how they might deliver that in future as a partnership. So we're confident that those discussions are happening, and we know that a number of providers are already meeting to try and form partnerships of that nature. In terms of the step down, move on type accommodation, it is something that we don't have at the moment, and it is a gap. Essentially, that will help us where we have people who have maybe gone into larger hostels, who have managed to stabilize, have met a lot of their goals, and are ready to move on to something more independent. This will allow them the option of stepping down into smaller accommodation that they can share with other people, for example, where they can still receive some level of support, but at a much lower level, and where the support steps back to allow them to kind of maximize their development of independent skills before they actually move on to that fully independent living in the future.
And sorry, does that have to be in separate and different accommodation, or can both things happen within the same kind of accommodation block?
We'd still have some larger blocks of accommodation. The idea is that we'd have that mix to allow flexibility. So for some people, it may well be that they didn't need that step down accommodation. For others, it may be that having that step down accommodation in the community, or even being supported directly by a small within a smaller unit in the community, will allow them to build up community links, or even to maintain sort of other community support links that they may have in the area, rather than actually being directed to a particular location because that's where the hostel is and that's where the building is.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Every, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for explaining it so well, Lisa. And I think it's important to point out that this was a very rigorous review, of which several of my colleagues here were part of. And it was the place-based approach, which was so important to us from our own district's perspective. And also that this is driven by needs rather than a top-down approach about what we think would be good for our local residents. So I will totally be supporting this. And I think it's been a while coming, but I do feel one needs to reassure people that the process of the review was rigorous and was very well done, if I may say so. I would like to congratulate you on that. And hopefully this new style will better suit the needs of our districts where we will have more influence over what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Every. Councillor Hoy.
Yeah, just wanted to say, firstly, that I don't think anyone's made the point, but it needs to be made, that there isn't, we're not actually talking about any kind of reduction in finances here at all. So we're not, usually when we come to committee, we're talking about making savings, and this is one instance where we're not. So I think that's really pleasing. But also, just to kind of echo what Councillor Every said, this has been quite a long, arduous process, and just thanks to Lisa and the other officers really for their work on this, because we have been back like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times and said, can we look at this again? And it's good. And actually, I'm quite pleased that that's happened, because we've now got to a point where I think everyone's completely on board and we got a way forward. And like Councillor Every said, it's more kind of place-based now for each district, and I think that'd be really good. So I'll definitely be supporting it.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Hoy. I've got nobody else to speak now, so I mean, I'll just echo that. I know Lisa and the team have worked extremely hard on this. You know, when it first raised its head, this issue, crikey, maybe 2 years ago now, there was a lot of anxieties, but this just shows you actually by working with officers and members and our district and city partners, you can come to a good satisfactory conclusion. And this is how I see the paper really. So thank you very much, Lisa and the team. I don't sense there's anybody disagreeing with the recommendations on this. So unless anybody wants to object to this or vote against it, if you raise your hand function now, otherwise, no. So that's it appears to be in general consensus. So I'll take that as a unanimous vote with the recommendation. So thank you very much, and thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Okay, so in the change to the published agenda, we will now consider a report recommending a 12-month extension to the 274 home to school transport routes at a cost of £7 million. This key decision was added to the agenda on Friday, the 5th of March, under the special urgency arrangement set out in the Council's constitution and was published, and a copy shared electronically with members of the committee. When officers started the detailed preparatory work for the retendering process, it quickly became apparent that due to the continuing impact of the pandemic, the preferred option was to seek an exemption waiver for a proportion of the transport routes due to be retendered this year. In order to ensure that the council can continue to meet its obligations with regard to the provision of home to school transport, the tenders need to be awarded in May so that the operators can be ready with their vehicles and staff in time for September. So not to wait until then, the next scheduled meeting would have been too late of the CYP committee. I'll ask Hazel Bellchambers, Assistant Director for Education, to introduce the report. Sue Eagle, the Social and Educational Transport Manager, and Martin Kemp, the Quality and Development Manager for Passenger Transport Services, are also here to answer questions. So, Hazel, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bywater. So building on what Councillor Bywater has said, we're seeking the committee's approval for an exemption waiver request to enable 274 education transport contracts, which are due to expire, to be extended by 1 year. The cumulative value of the contracts is 7.2 million, which exceeds the delegated authority of the Council's Chief Finance Officer and Section 151 Officer. We did pursue that as an option, but we're told that it would require a committee decision. We operate a rolling procurement programme with around a third of contracts retendered each year. The annual retendering process was not undertaken in 2020 due to COVID. This resulted in all contracts which were due to expire last year being rolled forward by a year. We are now rapidly approaching the expiry date for those extensions and need committee approval to extend the contracts by a further year. This will enable staff to maintain their current focus on supporting schools and families now that all schools have reopened for all children and young people. It will also ensure continuity of service provision for operators, enabling the council to continue to meet its statutory duties with regard to the provision of free transport for those children and young people who meet entitlement criteria. On behalf of the service team, I would like to apologise for the very late submission of the report and would like to thank the committee for giving consideration to this request. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Hazel. We'll open this to members now. So members, any members wish to make a comment or ask a question? Councillor Every.
Only to say that I don't think we really need to discuss this, because if we're going to have our buses and our transport in the right place for our youngsters at the right time, and because of COVID, I think I'm really happy to support this extension so that there's smooth running. Any further disruption to any of our youngsters, we really can't count on them. So I would totally support this.
Thank you, Councillor Every. Councillor Downs, please.
Yes, I'm minded to support it, but is the demand still the same?
I think Hazel's frozen there. John, could you come in? John, is Hazel's frozen?
Yeah. Peter, the demand is dynamic all the time. Obviously, we're going into a new round of allocations from September, so it will change. What we're seeking, though, is not the volume; it's the ability to go out and go through the process without the full tender arrangements. So we will allow the fact it's a different cohort, different children traveling different directions. That happens consistently. So it's not a simple extension. It's looking at the provision, but not going through the full tender process.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And any other members who want to make comment or question? I think Hazel's presentation and the paper that's come before us has made it quite clear what the choices are, and Councillor Every's alluded to that really. I think just as chairman, we just need to keep an eye on this going forward. We don't know how long COVID's going to be with us, and hopefully we'll be out of it very soon. But it's something we need to keep a close eye on, John. So you can take that back. Hazel's not here, so so I'm not getting any sense that anybody disagrees with the proposal. So unless you want to disagree, could you raise your hand function now? No. Okay, so I'll take that as a unanimous decision by the committee. So thank you very much. John, you just raised your hand.
Can I just, sorry to put it on record, I'd just like to thank the transport team. I think they've had a really challenging 12 months through COVID, and I'd just like to acknowledge their hard work and effort. That's a significant amount of hours as well. So you've got several of them here, but just thought it's important to recognise that because it's been really tough and often missed when we talk about the front line, and what we're doing. But transport is so critical to what we do in Cambridgeshire.
You're absolutely right, John, and I apologise to Martin and Sue and the team who are here. You're absolutely been excellent during the last 12 months, and without you, I don't know where we would have been. So thank you very much, and it's much appreciated on behalf of the committee. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We'll pass it on to the team. Rest of the...
Thank you. Okay, so we'll now move on to item number 6, is the Finance Monitoring Report for March 2021. Which will be introduced by Martin Wade. Martin is here. So the Strategic Finance Business Partner, and I think you're going to be supported as normal by Lou and John. So over to you, Martin. Thank you.
Thank you. So not much of an update really from the report that was previously presented to committee. The overall position across P&C has remained pretty consistent for the last couple of months. So we're showing around a 6.6 million overspend in totality, the majority of that relating to adults and COVID related spend. You can see in the table at 1.3 of the covering report, the position for the budget areas that are pertinent to this committee. The overall position has deteriorated slightly from a £64,000 forecast overspend at the end of December to just under 360,000 to the end of January. The most significant changes are items that we've highlighted previously. There's been a £200,000 increase in the forecast for children and care placements. That's gone from 700 to 900,000. That has, however, been offset by underspends elsewhere in the children's social care arena. So that's kind of netted off overall. There then has been some slight increases in some of the other service budget areas which have been affected by COVID. Particularly, and there's also been an increase in the costs of home to school transport special. That's gone up by about £85,000 from the previously reported figure, and that is as a result of increased demand. Linking back to the previous item, we are continuing to see that increase in demand, especially in the special sector. The other area I did want to highlight was, again, in terms of the dedicated schools grant, that has increased again in terms of the in-year position. At the start of the year, we were forecasting about a £12.7 million in-year deficit on the DSG. That did reduce somewhat at a midway point of the year, but we're now starting to see that, again, that demand has increased back up slightly. So we're now back up to around 12.3 million in-year deficit on the DSG. Just additional to that, just to say that we are now working closely with DFE officials to look at the kind of the work around the recovery plan and how we're going to manage that position going forward, as has been previously discussed at committee. That's it. They were the kind of the main areas I wanted to draw attention to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Before I open up to committee, John or Lou, is there anything you want to just pick up on in relation to that?
Chair, I wonder if it's possible for me to comment briefly on the outdoor centres, because it's a rather large figure, so I wonder if it's useful to...
Yeah, please, Jonathan, thanks.
So obviously you'll be aware, the outdoor centres are driven solely by external income. We sell our services to schools and to other organisations. And we've been working really hard to try and contain and manage those spends. Obviously, at the moment, the uncertainty is when schools will be able to restart residential and day trips. The current guidance says they cannot access any of that provision whatsoever. So at least until Easter, that's the current position. But I just wanted to reassure the committee around we're doing all we can to reduce the costs in that area. We do have staff on furlough, and we will look to see how the recent announcements from the Chancellor might support the minimisation of cost in that area going forward. But I just thought, because it was such a large figure, probably worthy of some further explanation.
Thank you very much, John. And as you know, I monitor it very closely myself, and I'm assured that we've done everything humanly possible to mitigate any cost to the council. But it is a very challenging time, not only in Cambridge but nationally. It's a challenging time for any outdoor sports and education. So thank you. Lou, did you want to comment on anything?
No, sorry.
That's okay.
Not specifically. I mean, most of the points that I would make,
you'll pick up on later. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, members. Any member want to raise any questions for Martin and the finance report? Councillor Downs.
Are we still using gravel water in that way?
Sorry. Could you say that again, please?
Are we still using gravel mortar as it says in the report?
John, you correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been, staff have been furloughed because of the recent lockdown. It's just basically been minimum staff management, just ticking the service over. But Wendy, would you like to come in?
I think Councillor Downs might have been referring to the fact that we were able to use gravel water for some of our vulnerable young people during the height of COVID. So I think the answer to that was not at the moment, but we still could if we needed to.
Right. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and thanks, Wendy. Any other member want to pick up on it? Okay, I'm getting a sense that we've been asked to comment and note the report, which is what we've done. So we'll thank Martin for his time. Thank you, and we'll move on then to agenda item 7, which is the Service Director's Report for Children and Safeguarding, which will be introduced by Lou Williams. So Lou, over to you, please.
Thank you. Just to apologise in advance, there might be some banging going on in the background. I have a bit of an emergency plumbing situation. So, if it gets too noisy, I might mute myself. So this report was written before the return to schools had been announced. It takes performance data up to the end of January of this year. And essentially, it's showing a kind of steady as you goes picture, in terms of performance in children's social care services. We are making some progress, continued progress in some areas. So we're continuing to see, for example, numbers of children in care stepping down, albeit at a reducing rate, but they're still reducing in terms of numbers of children in care. As Martin said, we have seen a bit of an increase in terms of the pressure around budget for children in care placements. And that's really because we're seeing a small number of young people with very complex needs that have come into the care system. That's currently showing at around an £850,000 projected overspend. However, committee members do need to remember that we had a 4.1 million savings target this year. So we've achieved the vast majority of that, in fact. And reassuringly, we've run the numbers for next financial year. And as things currently stand, we should be able to meet current commitments for the next financial year for children in care placements, which is positive. Where we are seeing some increase in demand is in terms of child protection numbers. What we believe this to be about, or what we're confident this is about, is just that it's more difficult in a virtual world to progress child protection plans to support parents to make the changes that they need to make. And, you know, hopefully as we move out of lockdown, we'll start to be able to move past that and to get back into a more face-to-face delivery model. We have, however, continued to do visits to children who we are most worried about. We've continued to do those in a face-to-face way, but things like group work for parents who might have substance misuse difficulties, that's gone virtual, and it's just not quite as effective as doing the face-to-face direct work. There are other issues, other areas covered in the report this time round, includes a brief summary of our revised clinical offer. This is about supporting children and young people in care, and particularly focusing that support to help carers meet the needs of children and young people with attachment difficulties who are often, you know, really testing in terms of their behaviour, and, you know, providing some additional bespoke support to those carers. I think I'll stop there. That's, I think, the main points of the report. And of course, as always, very happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Lou. Wendy, I think you've got a legacy hand up there, but Councillor Hay, please.
Yeah, it's just, I wondered how the COVID lockdown has affected the recruitment campaign for getting more foster children within our area. Foster parents, sorry, within our area. We don't want any more foster children.
I think actually I mean, you know, I think there's a potential ongoing silver lining to the cloud, actually, in terms of the COVID experience. I think it has made a number of people think differently about what you know, they might choose to do. So it's continued to be, you know, we've continued to recruit successfully, and in fact we've seen some increase in the numbers of inquiries over the period of time. So, you know, that might actually be a bit of a silver lining to the COVID cloud. I don't have the numbers in front of me, I'm afraid, but, you know, certainly anecdotally, that's what we are being told by our fostering services, that there's actually more interest.
That's pleased to know. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Hay. Councillor Whitehead, please.
Thank you. It's partly a specific point, but a general point. I see, Lou, you've got quite a long section on the problems with getting children medically examined with medical health issues. And that has now cropped up in a number of different contexts, that we've got problems with them, with cooperation with health visitors and medical staff. For example, we've seen that they've not been fulfilling their home visits to babies and young children. We've seen a low uptake of vaccinations. Now we're getting here that, you know, they're being a bit dilatory in providing, an assessment of children coming into care. And I just wonder if we ought to take this kind of these medical issues and look at them as a whole, and perhaps take up some issue with the Health Committee or with Liz Robin Public Health, to say, you know, we're experiencing issues over medical support in this area across a number of things, because it is deeply worrying that, you know, we're really not getting for young people the kind of health support they ought to be getting. And I know these have occurred in different places, but it does seem to me that perhaps there's some underlying issue that maybe we ought to tackle. We ought to put all these things together and perhaps go to the Health Committee or go to Liz Robin and just express our concerns about the problems in this area. I mean, I did suggest that vaccination might move to children's centres, because as the COVID-19 has shown, if you take the vaccination to the people, as it were, you do get the reluctant people more engaged. So I just wondered if that's something we ought to look at as a whole for the future.
So I was trying not to be too critical of health colleagues in relation to initial health assessments, actually, because it is a very complex area where certainly up until pretty recently, our services have been at fault because we haven't been telling health services quickly enough that there's a child that's come into care and needs to have an assessment. And, you know, so our health colleagues don't have enough time to make the arrangements. They are having those health assessments. It's just that the target is that they should have them within 28 days. And that's the one that we've been missing. And I think, I mean, there were some issues around new birth visits that weren't taking place or were predominantly taking place virtually in the first lockdown. Actually, I think that's moved on now and they are taking place directly. We do, I mean, Wendy, I'm sure might want to come in terms of the various boards that she chairs, but we do have really regular engagement with health colleagues, and I do raise these issues with them directly in terms of both the commissioners and the providers. I mean, I do think, you know, we have to recognise that there's a huge pull on health services at the moment in terms of both responding to COVID, but also responding to the need for vaccination and the vaccination programme rollout. But actually, you know, in many respects, our health partners have, particularly in the children's world, have supported us as well as they can, I think. There are some specific areas where there have, without question, been some challenges in the past. I think we're probably getting past those now. But Wendy, I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to say.
Yeah, just to say.
You're on mute, Wendy.
Sorry about that. Sorry, Joan, yes, as Lou says, I chair the Joint Child Health and Wellbeing Commission Board, and we are regularly talking about the impact of COVID on our health services. Generally, children's services has been more protected than adult services, but there has been delays in some provision of healthcare. Saying that, we have had more services in relation to child and adolescent mental health during COVID, because that's been recognised as a big issue. I can assure you that we are regularly picking up where we do have either individual concerns or more wider concerns in areas. Certainly, I know there's been some concerns in our education settings around therapists, and I've picked that up with the provider of those services. So nothing is going without picking it up, but equally understanding the pull actually for some of the other things that our health colleagues are having to do at the moment.
Sorry, Chair, may I just comment? I mean, we had these problems before COVID-19. I mean, we've had problems with is it 2-year-old visits that we had very low take up of health visitors visiting children. I think it's at 2 years they're supposed to get a visit, is it? Or there's certainly one, you know, sometime after the birth, but then we did have issues about that in a report before COVID. And obviously the low take up of vaccine is a constant worry. But if these things are being addressed, that's fine, but they do seem to be rumbling away in the background.
Thank you. Yeah, can I just come in on this? Because I know we've picked it up on our social care boards with the leader of the council and myself and Gillian, and we've made written representation now, haven't we, to health in relation to the initial health assessment. So it is something, but ultimately we've had to ensure that we've got our own house in order before we start saying to the health colleagues that, you know, everything's your fault and not ours. So as Lou's alluded to, really, I think it's important we're on that journey of improvement. Lou, do you want to come back in?
Yes, it was just to say that, you know, a meeting has been arranged following on from that issue that you've just discussed, Simon. So I have meetings with key people in health in the next couple of weeks, looking at, again, the initial health assessment specifically and about what we can do to improve performance there. I do think that changes within our part of the service will also help significantly. But I do want to be assured that, you know, there is sufficient capacity within the health element to keep on top of needing to complete the initial health assessment. So, you know, there's something about, because we haven't been particularly good at notifying in a timely way, that's meant that health colleagues certainly wouldn't say that they don't have enough capacity. But if we are notifying in a timely way, that might change. So it's about kind of making sure that all parts of the system are working well.
Thank. It's a good point, well made, Councillor Whitehead. And I think, you know, as a committee, when you bring your next report, Lou, I think it's important that we get a regular update on this, because, as Councillor Whitehead said, that, you know, it has been an issue for this authority for a while. So if we could keep pushing and pushing on this issue, that would be really helpful for our young people. Any other members want to raise a comment in relation to Lou's report? Okay, and okay, so we'll move to the recommendations. It's just to note and comment on the key performance information and actions being taken to continue to improve outcomes in children's services, and continuing work by all in children's services, including our foster carers, to support children, young people and families through the continuing pandemic and forwards. I've seen that. I believe it's unanimous unless anybody wants to object. We'll take that as noted and commented. Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to item 8, which is the report on young people not in education, training or employment. Lou Williams, will you stay on and introduce the report, please? I think Matt Oliver's, is Matt here? Can I see Matt? Yes, I can, yeah. Matt. Good to see you. So I think, Matt, are you taking us through it, are you?
I am.
Good to see you, Matt. It's over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, everybody. So it's my pleasure to take you through the report. So I think you can see that there are a few sets of data that we can use to determine the performance around NEET for care leavers. So the background in section in table 1 is our statutory reporting requirement for young people leaving care. That's a snapshot of those aged 17 to 21 and their EAT status on their birthday. So whilst that's helpful for government to provide comparison data with other areas, this can only provide a yearly snapshot in time. So the table above, we can see a reduction in performance for 2020. However, there's a picture emerging from the analysis that we've done in the monthly performance more recently and regularly collected data set, and that indicates that we're improving. So that's 57.8% in education, employment and training, and that's December 2020, and that would put us in the above the statutory neighbour average. So it is hoped that we can see that embedding this improved position through a focus on the actions in the attached action plan and the changes that have been made structurally in children's services to support care leavers. In the next birthday check report, which should be coming back in August, we should see an improvement, or expect to see an improvement in those figures. So to set the scene in terms of the general population is one of the questions that committee asked for a kind of an update on the position with regarding care leavers, but also the general position. With the table that is in table 3 for Cambridgeshire, we can see that we've always done very well. So we're in the first quintile, that's the top 20% of the country, and second in the statutory neighbour group, and both in the statutory neighbour group and the East of England group. And one of the areas that the committee has also asked us to look at was comparing general EAT performance against those young people who are leaving care, to see whether there was any comparison that could be made. So this afforded us the opportunity to try and have a look to see whether we could look around this data, and it was actually a very interesting exercise. It's particularly difficult, as the report notes, to be able to make a comparison, and that's really down to a couple of things really. It's down to cohort size and age range, so the way that we report the data across those different sets is different, and I think that that's something to note for the future. And one of the things in the NEAT strategy is to try and find different ways of making sure that we can make the right comparisons with data, because it's very important in the NEAT world that we're able to do that. But difficult to make a comparison for committee for this particular report. But what we do know is we know the number of young people who are NEAT, who are leaving care is low, so 23 in December. in regard to the impact of COVID-19 on the NEAT figures and the EAT figures, in Cambridgeshire, it's probably too early to be able to point to an impact on the figures, but we do know that young people and the industries that young people are traditionally involved with are being disproportionately effective. And we also know that, that young people that are vulnerable will be striving to cope with other impacts, such as disruption to schooling and mental health issues. And there's a comprehensive list from point 2.12 to 2.32 of the kind of actions that we've taken to support young people to go through the issues that they may be facing. So they include setting up group and working group to identify the early impacts around digital exclusion, isolation and financial hardship, support through the personal advisors to gain funding for laptops and provision for food and essential supplies, helping with adherence to COVID restrictions, maintaining educational courses through virtual learning and online face-to-face support, especially for those facing particular vulnerabilities, monthly NEAT reduction meetings to help join up support for young people and match aspirations to practical steps for EAT. And personal advisors have also been trained in relation to personal education plans, enabling young people's voices to be heard in those PEP meetings. NEAT personal advisors also providing additional advice and support to case holders, including support around interviewing, CVs and application support. Making sure our NEAT monthly newsletter is shared to keep personal advisors up to date with opportunities that are suitable for their young people. This has resulted in a good uptake of online courses through the pandemic. And we continue to promote higher education through virtual events and foster carers and open days for children in care and care leavers. So job hunting packs have been launched, and we've also set up a task and finish group to support the development of a send integrated offer for young people who are in care. We've been working with the DWP to ensure that work coaches are encouraging care leavers to take up opportunities under the Kickstart scheme. And we're part of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Gateway for Kickstart as well. And the virtual school and education psychology are working on the development of a trauma-informed programme, which I've seen a presentation on, which I really like, which is called Ace the Race, which aims to engage our harder to reach young people who are NEAT and help them to develop resilience, motivation, aspiration and self-esteem. So just moving down to the NEAT strategy part of the report in 2.33. So this is the part that I'm taking a particular lead on. The group was formed in October 2020 with the aim of developing a cross-system strategy which harnesses the opportunities to drive down the number of NEAT young people in Peterborough and Cambridgeshire, particularly in those existing newly vulnerable groups. The work of the NEAT strategy group is informed by and feeds into the Early Help strategy and the Best Start in Life programme, and reports to the Health and Wellbeing and the Early Help Partnership Boards. And there's a diagram there that just shows the different overarching governance, but also that the point of the strategy group is to draw together the plans from across the system to make sure that we've got an overarching view of our NEAT work. The strategy group identified the need for more focus and collaboration and synergy in the way NEAT issues were tackled, and agreed the best way to achieve this was with that overarching plan. And the plan areas are to identify those cross-cutting themes, develop a unified and holistic set of actions to reduce NEAT, increase cooperation and efficiency, reduce duplication and increase the profile of NEAT to draw in additional funding. And the work streams are on data and impact, early intervention, identification and tracking, supporting vulnerable young people and developing opportunities. And those were all developed with the strategy group in co-production and were the sort of first things that came through as being key areas of concern. Excuse my dog barking if you can hear them in the background, I do apologise. The strategy group is leading the development of that NEAT reduction strategy. It should be completed in April 2021, and the draft vision is written there, and that's that all young people in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough will be encouraged to meet their full life potential, get the support that they need to make a positive transition into EAT, and young people are placed at the centre of a coordinated system that makes sense to them, with focus given to young people who may face multiple barriers to EAT to ensure that they get the support they need to progress. And as illustrated by the above example, there's been a continued and considerable focus on supporting all young people and young people leaving care in particular into education, employment, or training, and more information can be found on the action plan. And I think that's probably about it for me, taking you through the report, if that's okay. And
thank you. Thank you very much, Matt. Thanks for your comments on the report. Members, Councillor Downs.
Yes, thank you very much, Matt. Would you say, getting it into perspective, has the experience of this year been positive in any way for you as the overall provider of this service?
So could you just repeat that? Has it been, sorry?
Yes, it's been an unusual year, clearly. But I just wonder whether you've learned anything from it which will have beneficial effects in future years.
I think there's some learning around the benefit of online working with young people.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing I was thinking about, yes.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's the thing, one of the things that I'm hearing. I'm not sure in terms of mental health and young people that in the early days, I did hear some, that there were some benefits for some young people who have anxiety in attending school. I think I'm not sure whether that's continued as isolation has sort of set in, but those were the initial early kind of things that I was hearing. I think particularly for our youth offending service, I used to work in that service, and they were finding actually that through things like WhatsApp and other kind of mediums, that they were actually getting better engagement with their young people than they had previously. So I don't think that will replace face-to-face contact, but I do think that it will add an additional element to it that we need to grasp hold of and take forward.
Thank you.
Lou, I think you raised your hand. Did you want to come in specifically on this issue?
It was just to say, I mean, I think Matt's right, but I think it's, as with all of these things, the ideal position is somewhere in the middle. So yes, initially, I think youth offending services, for example, were saying that there was better engagement. I think young people now are saying they really want some face-to-face contact. So it will be, I think what we've learned is there's real value to some virtual working to supplement face-to-face working, but not all of one or all of the other is probably not the place to be.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Thank you, Lou. Councillor Every, please, and then Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm just wanted to comment as Chair of the Corporate Parenting Subcommittee and just refer you to the two recommendations B and C. And of course, our remit is those youngsters in care. And I have to say, this has been a particular problem for us for some time, as I may say, Councillor Whitehead was health. And so these two strands have been quite difficult for us to monitor. And I would just like to remind us all as councils that we are corporate parents, and these children are not statistics on a page. They are individual children and young people, and we are their parents. So we have to ask ourselves, would this be good enough for my child? And I wanted to comment on a number of things. First of all, I absolutely recognise that there has been improvement, and that is very largely down to the change in structures and the way that things have been working over the last 12 months. And I thank officers for taking the care and the approach that they have done. However, it's still not good enough. I don't consider 23 of our NEETs, who are our young care leavers, as though. I think it's far too high. And I want to make absolutely certain that our emphasis that we have on our children in care and our care leavers is a high priority. This report normally comes to corporate parenting before it comes to CYP. So I'd like to thank actually the officers for sending it to us in advance, because we hadn't actually seen it. So I wanted to ask about what would be done about those 23 or whatever number they are to be placed into work, whether you have been able to identify specific barriers, whether there are themes that are coming through, and what that would mean, because for every youngster who's out of work is a missed life opportunity, probably for the rest of their lives. So if we're able to identify, for example, that it's maths and English qualifications, that's adult skills, if it's mental health, and so on. And I think I would want to see, and this is what we will be doing from the subcommittee, is drilling down onto what exactly this means. I'll just get back to that. I also would like to thank all of those who've been involved in the local offer, because our PAs and the work that we've done throughout COVID has been amazing for those young children in care, and I know who live in care, and I know how much they have interacted with them and provided services that perhaps they wouldn't have done before. They have provided excellent work, and I think there has been some advantages because of that, because of COVID moving forward. And before I get you to answer the question about the 23, I am going to do some shameless plugging for our business mentoring scheme, where we have 10 youngsters leaving care from CRC up to the age of 24, who are being mentored by trained mentors, one of whom is our chair, Councillor Bywater, on a one-to-one basis for these youngsters, which we know from the first set of research coming back and monitoring is really successful. And this is something we want to roll out in order to provide a greater wraparound service for those youngsters, which is not just their PAs, but independent business people who bring something else to them as well. So back, Matt, to the question. Have you identified 23, or Lou, sorry, wait.
We'll ask Lou, because I think Lou raised his hand.
23 people, how would you manage getting each and every one of those into employability, and what are the barriers, and how are we going to manage removing them? I'm sorry, but I was on a roll there. Dan, sorry.
Of course, and you're absolutely right, Councillor. I mean, anybody that's not in education, employment and training is one person too many in some respects. I think what has to be recognised is that this is a population of children, young people who have very often had some very difficult life experiences up until the point that, they've come into care, and sometimes actually through the care system as well. We have to acknowledge, where placements have broken down, they've moved around. And so it's probably not possible to say it is, that there is a common theme of it's maths or it's English, that there will be, those individuals will have very specific individual needs that require a targeted support and programme of support. And they won't be a constant at 23, there will be within that 23, there will be, a smaller number who probably really are a constant number, but others that move into employment and training and move out again, and that's the bit really where when Matt was talking earlier about things like the RACE project, about the work of the NEAT group now that meets with personal advisors that make sure that those people working with those young people, with our care leavers, have got a really good sense of the opportunities and the support that's available for young people, that we're really focusing in on those individuals who are most excluded. And I think actually just picking up on the earlier comment about virtual working, to some extent actually that we've learned a bit about engaging some of those young people. The next step is to kind of pull them in to the real sort of face-to-face world of employment, education and training. But you're right that 23, it was there to try and put some context around what the percentages mean, but it's still 23 too many. But they are going to be individuals who will require an individual and focused individual support to bring them into the education, employment and training process.
Thank you, and I knew you'd have. Thank you very much, Lou. That's really great. What we're looking forward to from the corporate parenting subcommittee's perspective is actually continuing the monitoring of that, because that is obviously our focus. So it'll be great to work on that for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead.
thank you. I'm on page 111.2.37, and also there's reference on page 115 to looking at pre-16. And I'm talking not just about children in care, but about NEETs in general. We used to have a very good program, and I'm thinking about early intervention, identification and tracking, of working in schools with children who were identified by the school as likely to end up as NEET. And we had intervention in schools at that stage. We had a team that went in and did that. Unfortunately, they're one of the early casualties of the savings required because of the austerity agenda. And I wondered whether, in fact, looking again at early intervention, identification and tracking, you were thinking of once again working with children in schools, whether they're children in care or not, to look at children most at risk of becoming NEET and actually doing some intervention, as it says on page 115, pre-16, before they actually get to the point of leaving school, because that intervention was very effective in reducing the number of NEETs. So I would hope that we are thinking of this much more early intervention and identification. So is that what that paragraph 2.37 means?
Yes, I think that it recognises that the landscape has changed significantly from those times, but really the point of the overarching NEET group is to really understand, because we have a kind of fragmented to a degree careers information guidance sector. Different schools use different methods to assess young people to determine whether they are at risk of becoming NEET or not. I think that's something that we need to understand across the piece. And I think there's also some really excellent work that's been started through the behaviour service and through Anna Whalen's work that she's doing, where young people do end up on the brink of exclusion or excluded, to recognise that they get the support that they need to get back into mainstream education quickly, and then to also identify them to us so that we can understand what needs to happen there. And I think they're also in terms of children in care and care leavers, the ability of the group to look across the similarities between young people who are in the YOS cohort, but also in the may become a child in need, for example, means that we can have a strategy across all those groups as well. So I don't think we'll ever right now go back to having lots and lots of work in schools, but I think that the strategy would ask schools what they are doing to support young people who might be at risk of becoming NEET.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joan. I can't see anybody else wishing to speak. Just from my own personal point of view, you did mention my name, Councillor Every, in relation to mentoring, and some really good work going on there. But I guess from a feedback point of view, and my own experience of it is we need to get to these people at the earliest possible age group when they're perhaps taking their GCSEs and doing it, because I think the guidance that I could bring to a younger person would be a little bit better on them, because ultimately they're making decisions, getting the advice and then making the decisions, as opposed to now that I'm speaking to a 22-year-old, they've made the decisions and now I'm trying to give them the advice. So we do need to, if we learn from that mentoring scheme, is to get in there as early as possible, really. But look, thank you very much for this briefing paper. The recommendations, I can't see anybody else speaking. So we've been asked to note the good performance in relation to the general population of young people in Cambridgeshire in respect of those not in education, training or employment, and the positive signs of the impact of renewed focus on reducing the number of young people in care who are leaving who are NEET. We've also been asked to support the monitoring, which I'm a big fan of, and obviously that's after the election, so it's crucial that we carry on with that after the election. Whoever's sat here and guiding it, it's important that our officers push that with the new members, that we take that to the corporate parenting subcommittee. I see no disagreement and heard no disagreement, so I'll take the recommendations as approved as unanimously, unless anybody wants to indicate now. No? Okay, so we'll take that as unanimous. Matt, thank you very much. Please pass on my thanks to the service and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, let's move on then. So we'll now move on to item 9, which is the update in relation to the Best Start in Life programme. This will be introduced by Nicola Curley, who has just joined us, the Assistant Director for Children's Social Care. And I see Helen's here as well. Helen, how are you? So Nicola, are you taking us through the report?
Good afternoon. Yes, I am, Councillor Bywater. So what I thought to do, Helen Freeman, I think if people remember, is the Healthy Child Programme Manager. So she's much closer to the day-to-day detail of the Best Start in Life programme. So I was just going to give you a little bit of an overview of the latest report and obviously answer any questions. But Helen is probably your detail woman if you've got specific things you'd like to know about the various pilots. So this report is really just to bring you a further update on the Best Start in Life strategy. I think you remember, perhaps you have one at the last meeting, the meeting before. This is a long-term project around our actually pre-birth to 5 children across Peterborough and Cambridgeshire, and we're looking at trying to improving life chances for children and develop a strategy around that with our health colleagues, leading to an integrated delivery model. And we had done those 2 bits. And I think last time we were with you, we were just really getting the pilots going, so phase 3 of the report. Now, we need to be clear that the work streams, so there's a series of work streams that are also listed in the report, have been impacted by the pandemic. And obviously health colleagues, particularly currently, are working very hard on vaccinating the population. So there have been some pauses, I would say, around some of those areas. But I am very pleased to say that the work streams actually have continued regardless, and that staff on the ground, whether health or early help or social care, have been very keen and have made real progress in the areas. So in Cambridge City, Wisbech area, and then Honey Hill and Thistlemore in Peterborough. So the report gives you quite a bit more detail on those different work stream areas that I won't take you through at the minute, but because I'm sure you've all read that, but we're very happy, Helen and I, to try and answer any questions that you might have about where the pilots have got up to.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nicola. Members, any questions in relation to the Best Start in Life programme, the work streams, or? Well, it looks very positive for you, Nicola, here. Look, there's, oh, Simon. Okay, Simon, please. You're on mute.
Sorry, oh, miles away there. Yeah, it was probably in the report. I may have missed it. When do the pilots finish? When are they? When's it evaluated? And then if it moves on to other areas.
Helen, do you want to? Helen, I think you're on mute as well.
No, we can't hear you, Helen. You're off mute. Okay. No.
I'll have one more go. So,
no.
Okay,
Nicola, we're gonna have to look at you, Nicola, please.
Yes, so I'll do my best. This is going to test me now a bit, but I'll do my best. So, I think what we had recognised, it's a very big and complicated programme. So I think what we'd recognised with the pilots is that we needed to do something concrete to see what would work and what wouldn't work. So they're not, what we're hoping, I think is the short answer, Councillor, is that they will just continue and will morph into the way we're working. So we're not going to sort of stop them and then do something different. So they will continue to run. We're at a stage now where we had a meeting the other day actually with Wendy, where we were discussing that actually we've got some now, what the pilots are throwing up now are some system-wide issues that need decisions. So about the use of shared buildings, for example, and how we might move forward with those kinds of things. And that was the idea behind the pilots, is that they would help us see in very practical terms. So we've got our strategy, but now how do we deliver it physically? So though they're throwing those things up, and what we're now going to do is then try and address those through the whole system and with using the work streams to support that. So they're going to
microphone.
Is
my microphone now working? Sorry,
Yeah.
I've been doing a little bit of jiggery pokery. No, Nicola's totally right in what she was saying. And so, yeah, we're designed them very much as an iterative kind of piece of work. So the first phase of that started a little bit later. We wanted to start at the beginning of January. We started kind of a bit into January. It was going to be a 3-month learning cycle. So we're looking at having the first kind of information about what we've learned available sometime in April. And then we'll kind of look at kind of planning the next steps from there. I'm sorry I wasn't available at the beginning. I thought I was talking and obviously wasn't.
That's okay. We are used to technical issues now. I think we've all grown used to it, so don't worry. Wendy, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say is also the learning of the pilots will help us when we're looking to roll out the model in other areas. That's one of the other things. And some of the things that Nicola was mentioning about the meeting with me is things like the digital platform. So we're really wanting to look at how we develop and share information with our families in the way that they want it. What we're quite keen to do is to do that as a system. So across particularly the health and the local authority system, rather than just being one agency or organisation. I think just going back to some of the things we talked about earlier, the relationship in those particular areas between the midwives, the health visitors, the children and family workers and the early help workers, it's really made a really, really big difference, I think, to the families that are accessing that model, and the workers are actually really benefiting from that joint working relationship. So there is some real positives coming out of it.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
Any other members want to ask a question or make a comment? No, just from my point of view, really, look, some great work going on here, Helen and Nicola. I think, how do we monitor this going forward? What's your plans in relation to coming back and briefing members? How are we gonna get updated is the question I'm going to ask you.
So shall I start, Helen, then you come in. So just in terms of governance, we do report into, we have an early help strategic board that Wendy chairs. So we report into that. It feels very frequent, but I think it's quarterly, perhaps. And we have the next one in March. So I think what we've also got, and if members remember, I think last time we were also talking about the strategy for our older children, adolescents, and early help as well. So what we're actually hoping to do at the next early help board, which unfortunately is just after this meeting, is to try and bring those things together and have a clear strategy and program that we would then want to be presenting. So I might suggest that we perhaps come either to the next, so I would have a look, maybe the next committee or perhaps the one after might be better, and we would have a very clear framework and be able to update members very specifically on exactly how we're taking things forward. But I'm happy to talk to Lou and Wendy about the exact timing of that.
Yeah,
but that would be my suggestion.
That you know, I'm happy with that as chair, but ultimately it'll be a different committee in the summer, so we'll leave that responsibility with you collectively of officers. But we do want to see it maybe in the middle of towards the end of summer, really. So just to get the update. So thank you. Members, any other questions? We're being asked to note and comment on the continued progress of the Best Start in Life, which is what we've done. So thank you very much, Helen and Nicola. We'll move on. Agenda item 10. So the last item on the agenda is the committee agenda plan, training plan and appointments. Rashenda, can I ask you to just update us, please?
Yes, Chair, there's only one change to the published agenda plan, which is to the May meeting. The report on the appropriate adult service will be deferred until July.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, members, any comments, or anyone want to make any comments or notes? Okay, so this just leaves me to wrap the meeting up then. I just want to take a couple of minutes just to speak to members and And really, just as chairman, you know, I've been chair here now for 4 years. It's been a huge privilege to have taken on this role and been chair of the CYP committee. But ultimately, my job's made a lot easier by you as members. And I know some members are not going to be standing for election. I'm not going to name people, or because I don't know simply who's standing and who's not. But I just want to say thank you very much to all those members who are not standing, who are stepping down. And I wish you every success, good health, and enjoy whatever you're going to do as outside being a councillor. And also just to say thank you very much to all the members who are going to stand for re-election. Good luck. We will know what the answer to the questions are in May. Who knows who's going to be here. So thank you very much to you all. Also to Andrew Reid. Andrew, you've been a stalwart in attending these meetings. Your input's been fantastic and we appreciate you coming along. And also to Flavio, who's not here. And then just finally to all our officers, Wendy, John, Lou, all of the people who contribute and give us the information that we ask for and want and demand sometimes. And thank you very much. I know we haven't always agreed all the time, but thank you very much. So unless anybody wants to say anything, our reserve meeting in April is not required at the moment. So the next meeting of the Children and Young People Committee will be Tuesday, the 25th of May. Okay, so I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.